A problem many players struggle with is that they're crazy cracked and creative, but they aren't as good in game. Today, I'm going to be walking you through the steps I took to transfer my creative skill to tournaments and ranked. I think that anyone that has the ability to master one thing has the skills it takes to master something else. The skills you have in creative are a foundation for skills in competitive and ranked. First thing that needs to be addressed when trying to transfer skills from creative to in-game is the difference in ping. In creative, your ping will be stable as well as noticeably lower. To practice on my in-game ping, I have two strategies. The first one is to play on a different region. I know for EU and other regions, there isn't a great secondary region because any other region is really high ping, but for me, an NA West player, my in-game central ping is around the same as my NA East creative ping. So if I want to practice on my in-game ping while I'm playing real games, I can load into an East creative server. The next strategy I have to practice on in-game ping is to use a VPN. If you draw a line from where you live to the server and pick a VPN location that makes the route less direct, it will make your ping higher. For me, I live in Arizona and I VPN to LA to get 50 ping, which is about my in-game ping. Once I'm on my in-game ping, I can 1v1 rebuild while progressing my in-game mechanics and fighting. Practice on these settings for 15 to 30 minutes a day, depending on how much time you have to see a real difference in your fighting and mechanical capability in real game scenarios. The next thing that differentiates creative from in-game is FPS inconsistencies and delay. While I'll list some things that you can do to practice on in-game FPS and delay, there isn't a real substitute for practicing in-game. The problems a lot of players have when translating their skill to in-game is that they simply don't play enough in-game. They only practice in creative, and they're so surprised when they don't do good in tournaments. It's important to scrim and play ranked so you can get as close to the real deal tournaments as possible. No amount of creative, no matter what region or FPS you limit yourself to, will ever completely substitute a real match. To simulate FPS from tournaments, there's a couple things you can do. First off, you can cap your FPS on something that's closer to what you get in game. While this is helpful, it doesn't exactly simulate how inconsistent the frames are that you get in game. What you can do on PC is open a bunch of programs at the same time to utilize your CPU. That way your frames are inconsistent and you have more delay like it is in-game. You can also combine this with what I talked about earlier to have higher ping and in-game delay so you can get the full in-game experience in creative. The next thing people do too much is play unrealistic maps. While certain creative maps are good for singling out certain things that you can improve upon, not many are close to real games. PGs have infinite mats and don't replicate real fights at all. Zone wars have their own set of things that they work on, and box fights are too confined to be real. Best modes to replicate fights in-game are realistics and full-scale Zone Wars maps. As for Zone Wars, playing Forever Zone Wars is the best way to get high-intensity moving zone practice without the downtime that comes from waiting for rounds to end. Also, they just added a Duo Forever Zone Wars map. That way you can practice duoing games while at high intensity with no downtime in the main competitive mode for this year. Code for it will be at the top of the description. I recommend playing this map for 30 to 60 minutes a day, depending on how much time you have. Once you can consistently drop nukes, I recommend that you play on higher ping and lower FPS so you can consistently drop nukes on that too. Realistics are good because they have in-game fighting scenarios, but what tends to happen is that people play with no urgency, resulting in drawn-out fights that aren't realistic. In order for these fights to be realistic, you both need to play with the urgency for ending the fight quickly, like you do in game. You also need to try to end the fight with as many mats as possible, as well as saving as many heals as possible. You need to find people with similar goals that will play the way mentioned earlier, but also people that are better than you or of the same skill level. You can make your ping higher and FPS lower to have better practice. I recommend playing these for around 30 minutes to as long as an hour if you have someone to play it with. The next thing I noticed that limits people's skill in game is their care for their placements in rank. Rather than playing while focused on improvement, people think and care too much about ranking up or having a bad event on their tracker. While caring about doing well isn't a bad thing, you have to think in terms of long-term improvement. While getting Unreal by camping every day isn't a bad thing, acquiring the skills you need to hit Unreal by W keying until you're a good enough fighter to be in Unreal normally is a better time investment for improvement. Same goes with Fortnite tracker placements. Some people are so obsessed with not having any bad events that they don't play in a way that can let them actually qual or give them a chance at qualifying. Instead, opting to play placement in a game where they would need a 20 kill win to qual so that they can get more PR. Gaining experience by playing the way you need to play is going to make your tracker look better in the long term by actually improving your skill to the point where you can get good placements because you are actually good. The next limiting factor and reason I see good creative players fail to do good in game is because they don't understand the key differences between in-game and creative. The pacing and game structure of a real match is completely different to a creative match. Since creative matches are short and only cover specific parts of real games, people struggle to understand and adapt to the different pacing during different parts of the game. For example, off spawn, you need to know how to play with bad loot, low mats, and low heals, which is something that barely any creative mats touch on. During mid game, you have to know the difference between fights where the main priority is to end it fast versus fights that need to be disengaged or taken slowly. And during endgame, you need to keep aware of the zones, which is another thing that creative maps often fail to address. The next reason I see creative players fail to do good in game is because they're in-game skills that cannot be practiced in creative. For example, dropping is something that can only be practiced by loading into a real match. For someone that only plays creative, dropping is something that they have close to no experience doing. That puts them at a disadvantage when it comes to getting the best drop for their POI. Another thing that there is no creative equivalent to is rotation. While you can practice a lot of skills of fighting in creative, like I mentioned earlier, there's no creative map that simulates real mid-game rotations that you have to make in tournaments and ranked. Currently, the real guns that are in the game aren't in creative, so the only way to practice with them is by playing in game. And while there are some maps where you can practice with third parties, there aren't any maps where you can practice fighting when there's a whole lobby to punish you if you don't block the right angle while pickaxing a wall. The last thing that can't be practiced in game is map knowledge. There are certain things to learn about the map, like where the chests are, which things you can break for the most materials, where are the barrels. Those are things that can only be found out by playing in a real match. Another reason why creative players don't do good in game is because they fail to identify and correct their mistakes. Creative is extremely one-dimensional. What I mean by this is that when you die, the reason is very plain and obvious. This means it's easy to correct and improve. In game, the solution to problems is much more convoluted and complicated. Whereas in creative, if you lose a fight, the only thing to look at is how you lost the fight. In game, if you lose a fight, while the answer might be as simple as you just lost because you made a mistake during the fight, you also have to evaluate and find out if there was something earlier in the game that led you making the wrong decision that got you killed. The next reason why creative players don't do good in game is that people are generally calmer in creative. People who are more skilled in creative tend to have more time in creative. This makes it so that they feel at ease while playing in a creative map. And in turn, when they play in a competitive event or a game of ranked where there's something on the line, it puts them out of their comfort zone. You can either improve this by just playing more in game, like I said before, or also playing like there's something on the line in creative. You can make bets with your friends on creative matches to get the same adrenaline you'd get from a tournament game. Another thing you can do to be calmer while playing a real game is chewing gum. Chewing gum is scientifically proven to make you calmer and more relaxed when doing something. Also, make sure that you limit any outside factors that can affect your gameplay. Marin TM touched on this in a video that he made like mine, but making sure you take care of any responsibilities you have, such as taking out the trash, doing your homework, or other things, will free up brain power so that you can be completely focused on the task of playing your game. For everyone who made it to the end of the video, I appreciate it a lot. If you enjoyed, consider liking and subscribing. If you want to see more content like this, thank you all for watching. The long outros. Bye.